almost any company that you step into, the number of people devoted to retention is at least 4 to 1 to acquisition.
What you're selling, why the brand was created.
I'll say Shed began as a weight loss injections brand. We do weight loss, we have longevity and vitality solutions.
All the best marketers I know trust their gut. They don't have to be right at all costs. They're willing to sort of say, I got this one wrong. Actually, the customer surprised me.
People don't really care to understand you, they care if you understand them. When people see a site that's easy to navigate, I think that part of why people like that site is because they're like, okay, this site understands how to take care of me.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Brilliant Commerce Podcast, where I'm lucky enough to get a chance to sit down with some of the brightest minds behind some of today's iconic, or as I like to say, soon to be iconic brands. And today I'm joined by Lance Dobson, as you now know, coming to us from Salt Lake City in Utah. And Lance is head of marketing, data and analytics at Shed, the telehealth brand helping people navigate the GLP-1 and whole person wellness industry. Lance has a really fascinating background and career that spans stops at a number of really amazing brands that I'm excited to learn from and sort of unpack. So with that, Lance, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me, Brian. I'm stoked to chat.
My first question is, where am I finding you? But I already let the cat out of the bag that you're in Salt Lake. But yeah, maybe take a couple of minutes and tell us a little bit more about your background and what led you to Shed.
Yeah, for sure, man. I'm historically an e-com guy. Worked in e-com for 15 years, and in the past 10 years, mostly healthcare. Although a hodgepodge. Started off as an agency kid, like everybody does, and made my way through a couple of really kick-ass brands. Made a stop doing kind of tech, not sales, but account management and strategy, and have been back in kind of the health and e-com space for the past while.
Okay. Yeah, the one of those brands that I saw was Backcountry. So I've been a customer of Backcountry for a little while. I would say sort of like a real fan. The agency thing is interesting. There's been a number of people that have been on my podcast that have either grown up through agency and then gone in-house, or have done the inverse. And I did agency first for nearly 20 years before going in-house, and then ultimately finding my way into software. Do you think there's a right way of doing it? I mean, if you rewind the clock, would you do in-house first and then go to agency, or do you really appreciate, starting an agency and getting an opportunity to see all those brands before ultimately landing where you are?
This is a fascinating question because I think it depends on your learning style a little bit. The thing that I really liked about agency life, and I think it does depend on your agency, of course, but the thing that I really like is that at an agency, you don't get, typically at the low level, you don't get paid great. And so what you kind of get paid in is opportunity to learn, I think. And so at at least that was my experience and what I saw. So when I look at, I keep calling them agency kids because it just seems like a lot of people grow up in marketing at an agency. And I think that the vast preponderance of marketers probably do, just because of the numbers, because a lot can be in an agency and not as many can be in a brand. And so I think that you get to see a lot of accounts. You get to see a lot of different not industries, but you get to see a lot of different areas that you can learn out of. You can learn brand marketing, SEO, performance marketing, copy. Like, you get to learn a whole bunch of things at an agency, where it seems you can do that at a brand, but it's just not as accessible across multiple areas. But if you happen to find a thing that really resonates with you, you're able to go 5 miles deep at a brand. And so I think that there's a little bit of luck, there's a little bit of learning style. And so I think that I would say that typically the agency first route's gonna be better, but I know, like you said, a number of people who strike it rich going the other way around.
Yeah. I think the opportunity to go deep is what I don't think one is necessarily better than the other. I mean, I know that I really appreciated being able to get to know multiple brands and get to try things out. And being able to share those learnings across accounts, I thought was interesting as well. And that was one of the reasons that some of the companies or the brands that chose to work with my agency at the time, they recognized the work that we did, and they wanted to not copy it necessarily, but how do we learn from that? And I do think that if you're starting out in your career, an opportunity to see an awful lot is really useful. But then eventually the opportunity to sort of say, yeah, like I really want to sink my teeth into this brand and get to know our customers and spend more time here. It's nice to, yeah, I think I consider myself fortunate to have done both. And it sounds like, you would sort of say the same thing.
I would. I would say maybe there's a third possible track as well, and I'm fortunate that I got to land in that as well, and that was my time at Adobe.
Aha.
It's you have the agency space, you have the tech space, or like the ad tech,
Yeah.
martech space, and then you have the brand space, right? And so I was really fortunate that I got to step in all three of those tracks. And and again, like you said, they have their benefits, but where the ad tech martech space has its benefit is that you get to learn the back end of the tech that both the agency and the brand are using, and so you get to see a little bit of behind the curtains on the algo, a little bit on the way of what the incentives are for these tech companies to try and sell to you, and understand that, how to partner with them, how to communicate with them, how to communicate back to the brand, those types of things. And so I think that there's also that track as well.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit more about the role at Adobe. Obviously, like massive company that does an awful lot. What was your role there? Or what products did you get an opportunity to work on?
Yeah, Adobe was really fun during the time that I was there because I got to touch a number of very very cool brands while I was there. I was on the Ad Cloud, and it was mostly Ad Cloud for search. And so historically, I'm mostly a search guy,
Mm.
paid and organic, and so but experience in a variety. But what we would do is with the ad cloud, the idea at the time, because the algos were a bit new as far as algorithmic bidding, it was essentially taking tech and layering it onto the search platforms for it to do the bidding, and essentially it was supposed to be able to do bidding better than the ad platforms can. That's since changed drastically. I mean, Google and even Bing have much better algorithms that are much more closely tied to their own data. They've kind of built their own walled gardens, and so it's different now. But at the time, that was the game, and Adobe did a pretty good job. And at the time, it was like the Kenshus, the Marins, the Adobes of the world. That was kind of that game. And so essentially, we would go into different companies and say, you have a medium to large size search business. We want to come in, make it more efficient, enhance your reporting, layer in a little bit of agency style kind of consulting, and help grow your business.
Okay. And you said game. And I remember the early innings of SEO when it did feel like a bit of a game. We would see the algorithm change. We were trying to reverse engineer it. There were all sorts of strategies that you used to turn to, including like creating backlinks and shadow content, like stuff that was really just trying to get ahead. Like it was do whatever you had to do in order to get on the first page. Now it sounds like some of the work you did at Adobe was adding some structure to that game. How do we make it not a game, but how do we start leveraging data to give you insights so that you can start making maybe the content better, so more authentically delivering those results? As we think and as we see the landscape changing once again, sort of under our feet, with agents doing more and more of this discovery for us, like what sort of advice would you have for people that have grown up in kind of SEO and have a certain strategy that has worked well there? What advice would you have for them to adapt that strategy so it's not a game with these agents, but to sort of to stay ahead? Or is it still too soon to say?
Right now, it seems like in some ways more things change, more they stay the same. In this particular area, it's just keep your ear to the ground and aggressively research, stay well connected. I mean, we've been holding on for dear life on the SEO side here at Shed. Really, but I would say bringing in multiple perspectives, because eh, I think it can be easy, and this is a luxury that I have because I have the experience to know kind of which perspectives to bring in. But it can be really easy to say, I like this tool, I like this provider, I like this consultant, I'm going to stick with them. I think it's important to remain skeptical and to bring in new perspectives with regularity. I think that's the case in most marketing, just because it can get easy to get really narrow minded, has a kind of a stigma, but
Yeah.
narrow tunnel vision on the things that you're working on. So I think it means, all right, you found a thing that works. Bring in another perspective, do an audit, and make sure that it's incented right. Make sure that it's not an agency that wants to win your business. It's an audit for the sake of the audit. Bring in another consultant to look at things, to give advice, to dice things apart, and do that with some regularity, so that you're not in that feedback loop, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I found the same thing. I like what you said. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Like the AEO, the shift to AEO from SEO hasn't really felt like much of a shift necessarily. Especially if we consider the fact that SEO became less of a game as it became something that you could understand. Content matters, good content matters. Like the agents are seeing, or the robots are seeing the same thing that we as humans are seeing. And there was no way of cheating. And it's sort of like you got to continue to make good investments there. You have to continue to measure it really well. I think the advice of having some perspective, like external perspective, and maybe this brings us back to the agency conversation we had before. It's one thing for you to see the traffic that your brand is getting, but how do you understand how that compares to what others are seeing? And it's we're all in it together type thing. So whether you're working with agencies or you're going to different conferences and you're just asking your colleagues, like, what are you seeing and what's working, and keeping your ear to the ground, and always being willing to learn and adjust, I think is probably the best advice that we can give. I'm
Yeah, agree.
curious. I sort of kicked us off, sort of, saying where you were at Shed, but can you, relatively new brand, if my understanding is correct, can you tell us a little bit about what you're selling, why the brand was created? Because I want to sort of like take us into the importance of brand, but I want to sort of level set on like, what is Shed?
Yeah, Shed I'll say Shed began as a weight loss injections brand from the beginning. As of right now, the idea and the vision is for it to become the most complete fitness and wellness solution, right? And so that sounds like big things. We aren't there yet, but we're building big things. And so a lot of what we still do is a small subset of things that you can see on the website. We do weight loss injections. We have a very exciting new weight loss lozenges, kind of troches
Whoa.
style medication that we just released this week, which is really timely. It's for those who are injection averse, which there are plenty of those. We're gathering data on the efficacy, but the initial results are super exciting. And
Wow.
so really exciting things in the weight loss space, especially for those who want options that aren't necessarily injection related. But we do weight loss. We have longevity and vitality solutions, so energy boosting and those types of things, as well as hair loss treatments. And so that's what we are. What we are right now. The thing that I would add is that's just the icing on the cake, but also in some ways a cornerstone. And so I don't know how to mix those analogies correctly, but is our coaching, is our human aided programs. And so the thing that I always say is I don't want to be the company that's just flinging vials of juice at people and saying inject yourself with this. We want to be a customer and patient first platform that has humans to help you, to walk you through using these, so that these are sustainable, actual, person first solutions. So that's what Shed is in a nutshell right now.
Cool. I love that. And I think if so much of the success, I would imagine, runs through the relationship you're going to be able to establish with your customers.
Yeah, 100%.
And relationships, to me, I mean, I kicked us off by saying I loved using the term iconic brands, or next to be iconic brands. I think you can't be iconic without having this like healthy cohort of customers that really believe in you, and ultimately support the brand. And I say this with all of the respect. When I think about weight loss or GLP-1, or even things around longevity, there's an awful lot of interest in the space right now. it is what I would call, I think, a generic category. And if that is fair, how do you, as someone who is, in charge of growth and in charge of marketing and is looking at the data, how do you advocate for the importance of brand investment in order for you to really stand out and to ultimately win in a category that is somewhat generic?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I think in some ways it goes back to the blocking and tackling of marketing business in general. Uh, and I'll invoke some trite sayisms here for a second, but there's always that thing where it's like people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, which is
Ah, I
is
like
sort
that.
of the grandma's version of saying people. I think that people, customers, patients, clients, but people don't really care if don't really care to understand you. They care if you understand them, right? And so
Whoa.
I think that in looking at the way that the brand tries to go about things, when people see a site that's easy to navigate, I think that part of why people like that site is because they're like, okay, this site understands how to take care of me,
Yeah.
right? And so in a lot, like people are self-interested in that way, as they should be. And so I think the right answer is always saying, how do we show that we understand you? And a lot of the best content that I see on the interwebs these days really emphasize that. We say that, and you can even see this in like comedian content, right? I consume a lot of stand-up comedy. And the thing that you see the most is people respond the best to comedy, whether it's overtly funny or whether it's dark and crazy, is when they go, "Oh my gosh, that's totally me." Like
Yeah.
it's like that comedian sees me and they've never even met me, right? Same with marketing in a lot of ways. It's like, "Oh my gosh, I see this ad. This gets me." I see this a lot in the self-help space, to be honest. And so there's the BetterHelps, the talk spaces of the world. Strawberry.me is another good example. But even when I look at a lot of a lot of those I mean, even I saw this with an app that was designed to help teach AI, right? And it had like a bunch of courses. And this is why I think there's been a huge proliferation of Quizlets, kind of quiz forms to get people in, because this isn't, even though this is about the company understanding the customer, there certainly is that aspect. I think that people feel like that by filling that out, the company is beginning, or I'm sorry, I need to put that. Well, no, that's right. Sorry, I'm
Yeah,
making
that
sure I'm
is right.
wording that what I meant. But I think that people going through that, and even if it's manufactured and artificial, I think that people believe that the company is understanding them and assigning them a treatment, a product, an intervention of some kind that is married to that person's specific needs. And so that's why I think that the focus for marketers, especially those in a generic brand, is to find ways to say, I see exactly where you are. It almost doesn't matter. And I think that's why the Geicos, the Pepsis, the all of these of the world create marketing that's just to say, here's a day-to-day experience. Like I'm thinking of Progressive Insurance and their what happens when you become a parent, or it's like what
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah,
remember,
don't
but
become your parents. Those ads crack me up. But and that's a generic product. They're selling me insurance, but like, who do I want to be associated with? Do they get me? Like, oh, I
yeah,
can
they
see
understand
myself
me.
becoming my dad. Yeah.
You cringe and go, "Oh no, I am
Yeah.
becoming my parents," and so
Yes.
you feel understood. You relate in that way. So I think that's maybe the most important thing, and I think that in some ways that's just good life advice, right?
Yeah.
In interacting with people, it's like if you want to really become a value add in the world around you, you have to learn how to help people feel like they're understood by you.
Yeah. So again, it comes back to like the more things change, the more they're really staying the same. Like you're describing traditional marketing, and and I think when there is that data capture, that's where you're sort of establishing that trust relationship with the customer. And I think there is a responsibility as a brand to demonstrate that you're going to do something. There's a fair value exchange. So I'm telling you something about myself, and maybe it's personal, and I want to get there because I think that the healthcare side of this is important. And then I'm not just going to try to encourage you simply to add something to cart. I really want to start establishing that relationship with you to bring you back. And I think like yes, there's the healthcare side of it, but you're ultimately selling a product that these customers are going to put, I like to say, in or on their body, and like that's the barrier for trust is even higher. And so it's like understanding customers. I think that's it's not always the easiest thing to do, and
Yeah.
to pull it off well and to pull it off in a way that is authentic. And so you've done like marketing and acquisition and retention at a number of traditional brands, like whether you're selling outdoor goods. Are there any challenges like that are very specific to healthcare, to data capture, that maybe surprised you? And so for others that are sort of in this space, advice you might have for them?
I think that I've worked in healthcare or healthcare adjacent for 10 years, whether consulting at Adobe or in-house. I consulted with 1-800-Contacts for a number of years while I was at Adobe, and then was in-house there for a handful of years. And then I've helped a couple, or I've helped a CPAP brand and
Okay.
a couple of things like that. Again, generic category, nothing sexy or fun about CPAP. And I think that the difficult thing always is compliance and privacy, right? You
Okay.
have layer above privacy that you have to adhere to that has legal standards, and so that one's always tricky. And I've said before, that one's just making sure that you're able to give your attorney a hug and that he'll hug you back, so that
Yeah.
you can get good oversight on how to manage your data and your agreements there. So that one's always there. And what it means in effect is that you don't get to use a lot of the traditional uh, kind of tracking enhancements that come with a lot of platforms, just because you have to anonymize everything, which is an extra step, and you have to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row. And if shit happens, then you have to report things. And so
Yep.
it's just a lot. And so it's not like it can't be done. It's just, again, it's just a lot.
So, but I've read and listened to some of the things that you've said. You're kind of on record as being a privacy first person for your customers, and so like, how do you think about incorporating privacy as a brand promise? Is that something that comes through in marketing, or is it just something that is built into what you all are doing?
That's a good question. I think that if you were to go look on the ad preview tool on Meta and look at the ads that we have out there, we don't do a ton of that. And I think that in some ways, I always go back and forth on this one. So it's a really fascinating question to me, because I think on the one hand, I think it could be a thing, but also in some ways you almost don't. It's kind of like when you're doing, if you're pulling a sliver out of your kid's hand, you want them to look away while you do it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and
Huh.
so it's the kind of thing where it's like, I want the expectation to just be I want it to just be expected that we're going to be privacy first. And if we begin to say that we are, I worry sometimes that people will question if we actually are. And I guess the reason I say that is because if you say that you are, they're like, well, I expect it to be that way. So why are you telling me
Right.
that you are? Or I don't know. I've seen that happen where people are like, I wasn't thinking about it, and now I'm thinking about it, and now I'm worried about it. You know what I mean? So
Yes. So maybe another way of saying it is, if you do your job as a brand and you've established the relationship with the customer is happy to be there. And you talked about UX, the investments there, making sure that the site feels intuitive, that you're just taking care of the customer, that you're understanding them. Maybe that's one way of having the trust just be implicit versus very explicitly saying, we're privacy first. And you're like, well, wait a sec. What does it mean? Does that mean you weren't before? Is everyone
I have
else
a question.
not? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously, not obviously, but I mean, I see the Apple ads everywhere. They've decided that Safari is going to take this stance as a privacy first browser. And on the one hand, like, I've been a privacy first person for a very, very, very long time. And it's sometimes to the disappointment of my marketing counterparts when, I was expected to deliver the staff that they were going to use to acquire customers. And I've always wanted a brand that I'm associated with I want us to use our customers' data in the same way that I would want my customer data to be used. And so like,
Yeah.
sometimes that standard is really, really high. But when I see a company like Apple really being out there and obviously investing millions and millions of dollars, buying up these billboards to say like, Safari keeps you safe. The thing that that come back to all the time is like, do customers really care these days? Or are we just we feel like, like our data is an asset, and we're just like, we're happy to give it away as long as the value that we're getting back from the brands is meaningful to us. And I don't know, I don't have a right answer here, but I continue to be fascinated by seeing these investments, having opportunities to talk with people who you don't have a choice, actually, given the industry that you're in. Like, you do need to think about this in a privacy first way. But what I'm hearing is that you all are trying to create those trust relationships with your customer in a way that isn't like overtly built into the branding.
I think so. Right now, I mean, it's difficult to tell. We test a lot, and it very well could be the case that at some point we decide to say, maybe this would engender a bit more trust. But I think right now, I don't know. This is my intuition, which intuitions in marketing seem wrong very often. So there's that. But I think that people maybe are a little bit tired of having scare or anti-scare things thrown at them.
Yeah.
It's like, we're going to keep you safe, and people are
Yeah.
like, can you just be safe and
Yeah.
not have to bring that up because they
Can that
don't
be
want to.
table stakes? Yeah. Can that be
Yeah.
table stakes? Yeah.
I'm just tired of being worried and scared all the time. So in some ways, I think that that's my intuition on it. But I'm always open for an interesting test. So who
Well,
knows?
I think being willing to be wrong, I think like that's really important. All the best marketers I know trust their gut, and they're also the first ones to not have to. They don't have to be right at all costs.
Yeah.
They're willing to sort of say, I got this one wrong. Actually, the customer surprised me, and I'm going to pour
Yeah.
that learning into the next thing that I do. The other thing that I wrote down here in my notebook as you were talking is this idea that you can't take advantage of some of the perhaps like the retargeting tools, given that healthcare or healthcare adjacent. And I wonder, as I think about the landscape for acquisition and really for retention today, given that we are moving very quickly into more of a privacy first world, whether our customers are choosing to use privacy browsers or like your ability to be anonymous is almost automatic these days. I'm seeing some marketers shifting less into like hyper personalization and more into persona based marketing. And actually, I'm sort of seeing some really interesting results there. So I'm wondering if this constraint that you have, or that, on the one hand, you might be held back, is actually an advantage. And so at Shed, are you doing anything like this, like looking at different personas? And does that impact the way that you try to acquire customers today or to reacquire customers?
This goes back a little bit to the what I keep. I didn't say this a minute ago, but this to me is the meeting people where they are concept, and helping people feel understood. I think that certainly persona based can be useful, but I almost think that persona based can become a too high resolution proxy for addressing the problems that people are encountering and helping them feel understood at the level of the problem and solution. And so, can it be? Yes, I think that personas can be useful, but again, I think that the simply understanding the very specific problems that people are encountering and addressing them there, and finding ways. This is fascinating, actually, because I I go back and forth on hyper personalization all the time, because it does look and feel like it can be the marketing's version of analysis or paralysis by
Yeah.
analysis.
Yeah.
Just because you're like, all right, well, like, let's dice that apart, and you have a tree of hyper personalization, which may not help people feel understood, and may not build a relationship, and may not target people where you need to target them, and what to kind of your point. And so I think that's where I do like the idea of just having your starting point being at the problem and the solution, and perhaps working outward from there, but addressing those, making the experience about that. When I think about the types of just full, if I make it super linear, like ad, landing page, conversion, full experience that seems to work, it's one that is hyper focused on the problem solution concept, and perhaps layering on persona type things. But I think that people can spin their wheels on personas a bit, because you that the persona may or may not encapsulate and be the right proxy for the problem.
I see. Yeah. Yeah, it does make sense. I mean, and I think that there's two different lenses that we can look through here. There's the acquisition lens, and then there's the retention lens. And
Sure.
10 years ago, it was all about acquisition. You say like retention, like what's that? Like I'm just going to keep acquiring customers because I have all this capital available to me. You've lived through both, and I would imagine that at Shed, well, actually, I wouldn't imagine. I'll just ask you the question directly. Like, how do you split your time between acquiring customers, with a net new brand, and then the customers that you are acquiring? How much of your time is spent on retention and maybe using those best customers to go and beget other customers?
I mean, I'd be willing to wager that at almost any company that you step into, the number of people devoted to retention is at least 4 to 1 to acquisition, probably
Really?
more. Like,
Okay.
the problem is like certainly within the marketing team specifically, it might be pretty linear, but most of ops, most of customer service,
Yep.
all of when you look at the number of people devoted to, I need to keep you. Like I'm
Yeah.
here to assist you because you're here. It massively outweighs acquisition, generally speaking. With maybe a few rare exceptions. Like I can think of a few like 1 to 3 man shops that are just there to get someone in and get a purchase and then
Well, maybe you're making a lifetime purchase. Like you're buying a mattress, and like I don't need to talk to you for the next 10 years or until I know you bought a house.
yeah. But I mean, I think about a number of the brands that I've engaged with, and you have one to three maximum paid search and paid media people. You have a couple of people who do SEO, maybe a couple of writers. So you have even in pretty large companies, you have a handful of acquisition people, and
Okay.
then you have an ops team plus the email team, the email marketing team, plus the customer service team, plus. Like you just have so many people devoted to retention, even if they're not necessarily the email and SMS team, they're augmenting those like crazy. And so I still think that retention is king in that particular
Yeah.
domain.
I like that. I mean, you work so hard to get the customer and make the customer love you, and I
Yeah.
think that that's kind of the name of the game. We haven't talked about AI in the couple of minutes that we have left here. I am curious. So we've talked about trust. We've talked about retention. We've talked about the sort of the human component to this. And you're working in an industry that is highly regulated. Does that mean that you have some constraints to leveraging AI, or what role? Actually, let me ask the question this way. What role is AI playing for you right now in either customer acquisition or retention? And what role, if you fast forward 18 months from now, what role do you see AI playing, if any?
First of all, I love that we relegated AI to an afterthought because
Yeah.
I've been
Yeah.
to multiple conferences where it takes up like the first half of the
That's it.
conference
There's
and
no
people are just
oxygen left. Yeah.
yeah. So I think that I mean AI is tricky to me because in spite of all of the tools, all of the ways that people talk about it, it's still mostly a 1 to 3 trick pony as far as I'm concerned. It can help with coding like crazy, and that's a
Yeah.
pretty big trick.
Fantastic
So
at coding. Yep.
not gonna deny that. Like I've replaced just for my own analytical and light coding work, I've probably replaced 1 to 3 dev people just by virtue of using chat AI. And so there's that. I think that I just don't. I'm not a fan of using it for content creation. I'll use it for perhaps ideation and content structuring,
Yep.
but I still employ writers and
Yeah.
still make my content be human written. And is there ways that you can perhaps in certain educational materials where it doesn't really matter if it's human written, I can see some benefit there, but I just don't. In my conversations with so many people, it just still isn't quite to the point where it's like, look, like we need to be AI centric, perhaps in the way that Shopify said that they were going to be about 8 months ago. I think that I do like the framework that Shopify came out with when they had their conference. They essentially said, if you need a new thing, you have to
Prove
make the
that
case.
AI can't do the job.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. And so I think that's a good framework because it does force you to try and see if you can do it first. And like that's the way that my team works. We use it a lot. But again, it's mostly like give me instructions on how to use this tool, which is immensely useful. Make some creative and let's see if that's useful, or if I can take that and make it more enhanced or do coding for me. And there's
Yeah.
probably a couple others that people are screaming at their phones saying, I use it for this and it's amazing. Fair enough. But I just it seems like it drops off pretty quickly. So I don't know. I'm not super convinced of that yet, except for perhaps in instances where people are using things like N8N and they're using true AI agents to feed data into and process it. Like I'm thinking of Fixer AI that does that with email inboxes. That's pretty rad. And so there's some things like that that can get really expensive though if you don't know how to set it up and use up a whole bunch of AI tokens. And so there's a bit of downside risk there. But yeah, I don't know. That's kind of a big nothing burger of an answer, but
No, it's a great
that's
answer. I think it's really helpful for people to hear how others are using it. I think there's sometimes this fear of I'm using it in these ways, or I've been excited, but I've been also disappointed. Like I don't want it to just shit out a bunch of content. I tune out right away when I know that someone has just basically copy and pasted something from ChatGPT or whatever tool they're using, and then they're just like posting that to LinkedIn. I'm like, that's not you. Like I'm actually following you because I'm interested in what you think and what you have to say. So I do think it is helpful for people to understand how folks behind these brands are leveraging the tools today, where it's working. It's really encouraging for me to hear you say, we're using it for some efficiency. I love it for ideation, like be a thought partner, but I really want a human being to be the final decider on what is good because I want to establish that relationship with customers. And so it brings us all the way back to kind of where we got started. The more things change, the more they kind of stay the same. And I think the brands that are going to win are the brands that understand how to connect with their customer. And if you can use these tools to get rid of some of the tasks that are really, really repetitive, to have you focus more on that messaging and nailing that perfect message, or coming out with an even better innovative product that then we're winning. Everyone is winning and we're getting moved forward. But if it's just the sort of a race to replace jobs, then I think we're kind of missing the point. So, yeah, I mean, as promised, we've covered an awful lot of bases here on today's conversation. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, Lance, thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. It was a pleasure. Hope we can do it again.
Of course.